Hello everybody, it is Tyrnor as always, and I wanted to do my opinionated look on exploring Azeroth, the Eastern Kingdoms. It came out a month ago, but I only got it in the mail a few days ago. Now, normally when I talk about new Blizzard books, I tend to split the video into 2 to 3 parts. A general discussion, a spoiler discussion, which includes the incidental bits of new lore, and if applicable, a discussion on major spoilers. And I will do the same in this case and post timecodes on screen and in the description below, although it's honestly a bit hard to apply this structure to this particular book. Now, to start off the general discussion, this book, as it's been advertised, is sort of a journal kept by Spy Master Shaw and his partner Flynn Fairwind as they travel across the Eastern Kingdoms. It's very much written in character and includes various notes and in-character annotations. I will say, as a general thought, well, that this was kind of a disappointing read, though perhaps I was expecting too much from it. People who follow my channel know that flavor lore and side stories are my favorite part of Warcraft lore, so this book should have been perfect for that. However, well, the first sign of alarm I suppose when I got it was that it was only 100 pages or so long. I finished it in its entirety in about 2 hours at most. And unfortunately, there isn't really much new lore mentioned in this book. It's for the most part a retelling of very general stuff that we already know, only from the point of view of these two characters in universe. Obviously I can't go into more detail here without touching on spoilers, but these are my general thoughts on the overall information provided by the book, which was the main reason I bought it personally. Now, to give my thoughts on the overall writing of the book, well, I will just say that Christie Golden has written much better stuff in the past. An important portion of the book is Spy Master Shaw's retellings of the various events and stories of the Eastern Kingdoms, which I thought worked well enough. However, and this isn't really a criticism, but since Spy Master Shaw is a very serious by the books person, his in-character notes in this book, while interesting, don't really have charm or emotion, which is probably intentional. That's why I'm saying that it's not a criticism. And to be honest, I enjoy Shaw's part in the book the most. Now, as a sort of counterbalance, Shaw's notes are often joined by commentaries from his partner Flynn Fairwind, usually to comedic effect. However, personally say 4 out of 5 times his jokes fell flat for me. I just don't really enjoy Flynn as a character, really. I find him to be kind of like a sober and not as funny Jack Sparrow. There were times when Flynn's comments did make me smile or giggle in the book, but again, for the vast majority of times they just made me roll my eyes and move on. Now, even if, say, you absolutely hate Flynn and his part in the book, which I don't, it probably won't make you dislike the book as a whole, because the comments are not that obnoxious or present that often. In fact, they're usually written to the side of the page, which allows you to ignore them if you so desire. For me personally, since I pretty much have to read everything related to Warcraft lore, I found Flynn's comments in the book, again like 80% of the time, to be the same as listening to someone try to tell a joke, flopping that joke, and them not realizing that they have flopped. For the people who like Flynn, I'm sure this book and his comments rate much higher, and hey, more power to you. It's just not really my type of humor for the most part. Otherwise, again, as part of my general look at the book is pretty looking. It has some well done images and drawings, and the pages and the cover are made in a way to emphasize its character as a journal of sorts. So as a collectible item, yeah, I'd say this book is good. So as a very general verdict, if you want this book for the lore, give it a pass and listen to my or someone else's spoiler section. If you want this book as a Warcraft collectible, then sure, feel free to get it, it definitely looks and feels pretty. If you want this book because you want to explore Flynn and Shaw's characters and their relationship, I think it's hit or miss. It really does not go into romantic detail, other than exchanges of brief notes I suppose, and it can be pretty juvenile at times. but it can work better for you, and there were times, rare to be honest, but there were times where I think that it worked in that regard. Now, moving on to the spoiler section of this book, as you know from the premise, the book is a journal kept by Spy Master Shaw with comments by Flynn Fairwind as they travel across the Eastern Kingdoms. The book opens with a document signed by Anduin Wrynn giving them leave to travel the Eastern Kingdoms and to take stock of the various artifacts and agents of the continent, as well as a document signed by Bane Bloodhoof allowing them to travel to Horde cities and outposts. As a small side note, since I'm an actual medieval historian who works with medieval documents on a regular basis, I will say that they really have no idea what medieval documents are supposed to look or sound like, but that's neither here nor there. Now, and this is the main reason I found the book to be disappointing, it gives very brief looks on the areas they explore, and they still leave plenty of zones unexplored. Namely, the book does not touch at all on, going from south to the north, the Blasted Lands, the Swamp of Sorrows, the Syrian Gorge, Loch Modan, the Wetlands, the Twilight Highlands, Gilneas, the Hinterlands, or the Ghostlands. Also not on Vizier if you count that as part of the Eastern Kingdoms, nor on the Alterac Mountains if you count those as separate from Hillsbrad, which are some pretty big gaps in the continent, and they all have plenty of interesting stories on their own. And even in the areas which they do explore, their looks really often feel too brief. I was hoping, for instance, that they would really make use of the fact that they are allowed to travel into Horde outposts to give us a different, frankly unique perspective of an Alliance visitor. But instead, the only Horde outposts they directly visit are Silvermoon and, if you want to call it a Horde outpost, the ruins of Lordaeron. Now, the general premise of the book, other than the fact that Shaw and Flynn wanted to take a sort of vacation together, is that Spy Master Shaw is visiting his contacts and verifying the status of the various artifacts in the Eastern Kingdoms. Basically, it means that the in-universe explanation of what happened to the loot in the Eastern Kingdoms dungeons is that they are, usually, in the hands of good guys who keep them safe. Namely, the loot from Stratholme and Scholomance is kept safe in Light's Hope Chapel. The loot from the Dead Mines is in Sentinel Hill. Some of the loot from Karazhan is kept in Karazhan by Khadgar. The loot from Nomargon is in Tinkertown and Ironforge. The loot from the Scarlet Monastery is in Stormwind. The loot from Shadowfang Keep is kept by the Bloodfang Worgen on Fenris Isle. And the loot from Magister's Terrace is kept safe, well, in Magister's Terrace, which is now a museum. We also learned that several characters we know in the game are actually Spy Master Shaw's agents. Fargold Ironwing, the dwarf who gives griffin tours of the Stormwind Harbor, Landro in Booty Bay, the goblin who sells trading card game mounts, Finko Einhorn, the gnome who gets eaten by a corehound in Blackrock Mountain, the Explorers League, almost as a whole really, Ivar Bloodfang, and some members of the nobility of Silvermoon. Now, I'm going to list the new pieces of lore that we get, and afterwards I'm going to end the video with the major spoiler section, probably the biggest reveal which will come out of this book. So in order of appearance, first off, this is something we pretty much already knew, but Stormwind Keep in-universe is accessible to visitors, even the armory and the war room, surprisingly enough, and obviously it has plenty of secret exits. Next, apparently, some people I talk about think that this is a very big deal, while I think it's mainly more flavor lore and you're free to interpret it in whatever way you wish. Namely, apparently some of the people who participated in the ceremony where Arthas Menethil was ordained as a paladin thought, in hindsight, after the plague and everything, that they saw the light hesitate to bless Arthas. Now, when I first read this, I mostly took it as a piece of flavor lore, that people in universe would look for explanations as to how the light could bless someone who turned out as evil as Arthas, and they retroactively convinced themselves that it did not actually bless him at all. But some of the people I talked to think that this is actually a bigger deal than all of that. Next, the bell of the Stormwind Cathedral was cast by the dwarves of Ironforge, who also created its twin, the bell in Lordaeron. Next, the Nobles of Westfall also answered to Hagar and were left in disarray after his capture and death. Next, Shaw actually talks to Khadgar and we get to see what he's been up to. As we know, he is studying in Karazhan looking for ways to aid Azeroth and gradually restoring it. It being Karazhan. He has mostly withdrawn from the public but constantly receives requests to get involved, which he finds irritating. Also, funnily enough, Shaw directly references the fact that Khadgar seems younger now than how he seemed during the Second War and Beyond the Dark Portal, but mentions that, when he is asked about it, Khadgar just smiles and does not comment. Next, they sort of canonize the Hearthstone expansion Rastakhan's Rumble. Namely, apparently, once in a generation, the trolls of Azeroth gather in the Gurubashi arena where, presided by the Zandalari king, they do battle in the name of various Loa. Next, and I am honestly so happy that this happened, Sibelian is mentioned. Shaw says that, other than Wrathion and Ebonhorn, Sibelian is the only remaining black dragon that they know of, but that he is an outland and currently represents no threat. Next, which for me personally might be an even bigger revelation than the big spoiler at the end, is that the keepers of Uldaman, Arcadus and Ironia might still be alive, which I loved since they are very important characters in Chronicle Volume 1, partially responsible for bringing the dwarves, humans and gnomes to the Eastern Kingdoms, and to have them just be randomly dead was honestly sad. Next, which I found makes a lot of sense, you know how the Explorers League has the skull of Tyrannistras, formerly Alexstrasza's prime consort, where there are plenty of archaeologists apparently who wish it to return to the Red Dragonflight, and there are active discussions among the League to do so. Next, apparently the Cult of the Damned in Scholomance, the place where the Plague of Undeath was created and perfected, also apparently experimented with a different plague, one that only killed people, which was why there are so many ghosts in Caer Darrow, but its residents were not turned into undead. Next, apparently the Court of the Sun, the seat of the leadership of Silvermoon, was mostly untouched by the Scourge invasion and was barely damaged. Next, did you guys know about that clothing shop in Silvermoon which was run by a warlock and a succubus who kept leper gnome slaves? Apparently they were found out, the shop has been closed and the warlock and the succubus have now disappeared. Next, the Alliance is carrying out negotiations with the Horde to return some items kept in Magister's Terrace, namely Antonidas' cape and Illyria Windrunner's headdress. Next, which we kind of already know, but we got a direct confirmation, the Alliance reclaimed South Shore and have started rebuilding it. And finally, that the plague in the ruins of Lordaeron and the Undercity is slowly dissipating at the moment. Apparently you can go in there for brief periods of time without suffering long-lasting effects. Now, here's the big spoiler of the book. Apparently, after Lordaeron fell, King Thoras Trollbane of Stromgarde, who was a personal friend of King Tyrannus, sent agents to retrieve the Lordaeron crown. His agents built the tomb of Tyrannus in the ruins of Lordaeron, including the epitaph, and then hid the crown. This is apparently evidenced by the fact that both the tomb of Thoras Trollbane and the tomb of King Tyrannus contain references to a bloody crown left forgotten. The crown of Lordaeron lies presently in the unmarked grave located in Stormwind Harbor's lighthouse. This was the big spoiler, more of a symbolic one than one with practical implications, but still interesting enough. So, this was my opinionated look at Exploring Azeroth the Eastern Kingdoms by Christy Golden. Thank you all for watching and listening to me, and I will see you all next time. Farewell.